There are jokes people make about marriage because they are funny. And then there are jokes people make because telling the truth would hurt too much. Steve Harvey had hosted enough episodes of Family Feud to know the difference. That afternoon, the audience thought they were watching a normal married couple tease each other. The husband laughed. The wife smiled. Their children stood beside them. Everything looked ordinary. Until Steve asked one question. Name something a wife might secretly check when she thinks her husband is hiding something. The buzzer sounded. 46-year-old Angela Brooks answered immediately. His phone. The answer appeared at number 1. The audience cheered. Steve laughed and turned toward Angela's husband, Darren. You better keep that phone clean, brother. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Angela. She looked directly at Darren. Then she said quietly, "Too late." The audience suddenly went silent. Darren's smile disappeared. Steve looked from Angela to Darren. "What you mean too late?" Angela took one slow breath. Then she reached inside her purse. Darren whispered, "Angela, don't." Steve heard him. He lowered his card. Angela looked at her husband of 21 years. "I found the messages." Nobody laughed now. Darren's teenage son looked toward the floor. Angela's sister covered her mouth. And Steve Harvey, realizing that what had started as a game show joke had suddenly become a real marriage crisis, stepped away from the survey board. He looked directly at the couple. Then he said 4 words, "We need to talk." And what happened after that would force one husband to admit that betrayal does not begin when someone gets caught. It begins much earlier, when they stop protecting the person who trusted them most. The Brooks family had come from Nashville, Tennessee. They looked like the kind of Family Feud audiences loved immediately. They were loud, funny, competitive. Angela was the calm one. Her husband Darren was the entertainer. Their 20-year-old daughter Simone had her mother's quiet personality. Their 17-year-old son Caleb had Darren's humor. Angela's younger sister Renee completed the team. Backstage, Darren had been joking with producers from the moment they arrived. He told everyone he was going to become the greatest Family Feud contestant in history. Angela rolled her eyes. "You say that about everything." Darren pointed toward her. "See what I deal with?" Angela smiled. People laughed. That was how they had operated for years. Darren talked. Angela smiled. Darren joked. Angela cleaned up whatever was left behind. They had been married for 21 years. To outsiders, they seemed solid. They owned a comfortable home. Their children were doing well. Darren worked as a regional sales manager for a construction supply company. Angela worked as an elementary school librarian. Every Sunday they had dinner with Darren's mother. Every July they rented the same cabin near Gatlinburg. They had framed family photographs covering the hallway of their house. There was a wedding photograph above the fireplace. Angela in white. Darren looking at her like no other woman existed. For many years, Angela believed that look was real. Maybe it had been. But 6 months before their Family Feud appearance, something changed. At first it was small. Darren started placing his phone face down on the table. He began taking work calls outside. He changed his phone password. When Angela asked why, he laughed. Company security. Then came the late meetings, Tuesday evenings, then Thursdays, then occasionally Saturdays. Darren had always traveled for work, so Angela tried not to become suspicious. She hated the idea of becoming the wife who checked receipts and questioned every phone call. Her mother had given her one piece of marriage advice before she died. If you have to police a grown man, you don't have a husband. You have another child. Angela had never forgotten that. So she trusted Darren, even when trusting him became uncomfortable. Then one night everything changed. It was almost midnight. Darren had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. His phone was charging on the kitchen counter. Angela walked past it while carrying a glass of water. The screen lit up. A message appeared. "I wish you were still here." Angela stopped walking. The message came from a contact saved as D. Wallace, office. Angela stared at the screen. She told herself there could be an explanation. Maybe it was about work. Maybe someone had sent it accidentally. Then another message appeared. Tonight was worth the risk. Angela felt something cold move through her body. She didn't unlock the phone. She didn't wake Darren. She simply stood there looking at the screen until it went dark. The next morning she said nothing. For 2 days, she said nothing. Instead, she watched. Darren kissed her before work. He asked what she wanted for dinner. He complained about traffic. Everything appeared normal. That was almost worse. On Friday morning, Angela finally asked, "Who is Dee Wallace?" Darren didn't even look up from his coffee. "Someone from work." "A woman?" "Yeah." Angela waited. Darren looked at her. "What?" "Nothing." He laughed. "You jealous now?" "No good, because that's ridiculous." Then he kissed her forehead and left. Angela stood in the kitchen listening to the garage door close. She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But she had been married to Darren for 21 years. She knew when he was nervous. He rubbed his thumb against the side of his index finger. He had done it while answering her. 3 weeks later, Angela learned the truth. Not because she went searching through his phone. Because Darren made a mistake. He left his tablet at home. Their devices were connected. Angela was cleaning the dining room when a message notification appeared. Then another. Then another. This time she opened them. She read nearly 4 months of conversations. Lunches, hotel meetings, secret jokes, complaints about Angela. Promises, apologies, plans. The woman was Danielle Wallace, a colleague from Darren's company. Angela sat at the dining room table for almost an hour. She didn't scream. She didn't break anything. She didn't call Darren. Instead, she read one sentence over and over again. Darren had written, "Angela and I are basically roommates now." Roommates. Angela looked around the room. The dining table she had saved for 6 months to buy, the curtains she had sewn herself, the family photograph from their 20th anniversary. Roommates. 21 years of marriage reduced to one word so Darren could explain his betrayal to another woman. Angela closed the tablet. That afternoon, Darren came home carrying groceries. "Hey babe." Angela looked at him. For several seconds she couldn't respond. He noticed. "You okay?" Angela almost told him, but Simone was home from college that weekend. Caleb was studying upstairs. Renee was coming for dinner. And Family Feud was 3 weeks away. Angela made a decision she would later question many times. She would wait. Not because she wanted revenge, because she needed time to understand what she wanted. Did she want a divorce? Did she want counseling? Did she want him out of the house? Could she ever trust him again? Angela had spent 21 years making decisions around her family. For once, she wanted to make a decision slowly. Darren interpreted her silence as ignorance. That would become his biggest mistake. The Brooks family started the episode strongly. Steve walked to their podium. "All right, Nashville. Who are we working with?" Darren proudly introduced everyone. When he reached Angela, he placed his arm around her. "And this beautiful woman is my wife of 21 years. The audience applauded. Steve looked at Angela. 21? Yes, you still like him? Angela gave Darren a quick glance. "Ask me after the show." The audience laughed. Darren laughed too. Steve pointed at her. That answer sounded dangerous. Angela smiled. "I'm just saying, Steve." They moved on. The first round was harmless. Name something people argue about on vacation. Darren answered, "Directions." Number 1. Angela laughed. "That is definitely him." Darren protested. "I know where I'm going." Angela shook her head. "You got us lost going to our own anniversary dinner." The crowd laughed. The family looked relaxed. For a few minutes, Angela almost forgot what she knew. That was what made betrayal so confusing. A person could hurt you deeply and still make you laugh. You could be angry with someone and still remember exactly how they took their coffee. Love did not disappear the moment trust broke. Sometimes love remained. And that made everything harder. The Brooks family won the first round. Then Steve read the second question. "We asked 100 women, name something your husband might do that makes you think, something ain't right." Angela and the opposing contestant hit their buzzers. The other contestant answered first. "Come home late." Number 2. Angela answered, Hide his phone. Number 1. The studio exploded with cheers. Steve laughed and walked toward Darren. Brother, listen to me. Darren grinned. Yes, sir. That phone will destroy a happy home. The crowd laughed. Darren said, my phone is innocent. Angela turned toward him. Your phone needs a lawyer. The audience screamed. Steve's eyes widened. Darren's smile tightened. All jokes today, huh? Angela looked at the board. Apparently, Steve noticed the tension, but he kept the game moving. Renee answered, suddenly dressing better. Number 4. Simone said, working late. Number 3. Steve looked toward Angela, then Darren. The board now displayed, hide phone. Come home late. Work late. Dress better. Steve laughed awkwardly. Man, Darren, this board is starting to look like evidence. The audience laughed. Angela didn't. Darren replied quickly, well, none of that means somebody's cheating. The word came out before anyone else had used it. Cheating, Angela turned her head. Steve immediately noticed. So nobody said cheating. Darren laughed. I know, I'm just saying. Angela said, interesting. Darren stared at her. What? Nothing. There was another answer left. Caleb said, act extra nice. The bell rang. Number 5. The Brooks family cleared the board. They should have celebrated. Instead, something uncomfortable remained in the air. During the commercial break, Darren leaned toward Angela. What are you doing? Angela looked at him. Playing the game. You know what I mean. No, Darren, explain. You're making little comments. Angela almost smiled. You don't like little comments? Not when they're making me look stupid. Angela stared at him. That is what you're worried about? What else am I supposed to be worried about? She couldn't believe he had asked. Before she could respond, the stage manager counted down. 5, 4, 3, the lights came back up. Steve returned to the podium. He looked at the couple. He could feel that something had changed. The next question appeared. Name something people say they would never forgive their spouse for doing. The opposing family won control. Their answers came quickly. Cheating. Number 1. Stealing money. Number 4. Hurting the children. Number 3. Lying. Number 2. Then they received 3 strikes. The Brooks family could steal. Steve walked toward them. All right, Brooks family. One answer gets you the points. The family whispered. Darren spoke first, leaving without explaining. Renee suggested, embarrassing them publicly. Simone remained silent. Then Angela said, living a double life. Everyone stopped. Darren looked at her. Steve looked at her. Angela looked directly at the board. Steve slowly asked, living a double life? Angela nodded. That's my answer. Steve turned. Survey said. The bell rang. Number 5. The Brooks family stole the round. The crowd applauded. Darren did not celebrate. Angela did not celebrate. Steve looked at both of them. Something was clearly happening now. The commercial break began. Darren stepped closer to Angela. Enough. Angela looked at him calmly. You want to talk about enough? Whatever you're angry about, we're not doing this here. Angela stared at him. The sentence almost made her laugh. We're not doing this here. For 4 months, Darren had been deciding when and where the truth mattered. Now he wanted control again. Angela asked quietly, are you still talking to Danielle? Darren's face lost color. He looked immediately toward their children. Angela, answer me. Not here. That wasn't my question. His eyes hardened. How did you? Angela nodded once. That was enough. Darren knew. She knew. Simone was standing only a few feet away. She had heard the name. Who's Danielle? Angela closed her eyes. This was the part she had wanted to avoid. Darren whispered, please. Steve was across the stage speaking with a producer when he noticed the family. Nobody was preparing for the next round. Renee had an arm around Simone. Caleb looked confused. Darren looked terrified. Angela looked like someone who had carried something heavy for too long. Steve walked toward them. Everything okay? Darren answered immediately. Yeah, Angela answered at the same time. No, Steve stopped. Darren turned to her. Angela, she looked at him. No more. Steve glanced toward production. The studio was preparing to return from break. He asked quietly, "Y'all need a minute?" Angela looked at Steve. Then she said, "I think my husband needs more than a minute." Darren rubbed his face. "Can we please do this privately?" Angela's voice remained calm. "I tried privately." Darren looked confused. "When?" "For 6 months. You never said anything." "I asked why you were working late." Darren said nothing. "I asked why your phone password changed." Silence. "I asked who Danielle was." Darren looked down. "You lied every time." The stage manager signaled that the cameras were about to return. Steve raised a hand. "Hold the count." The crew paused. That was unusual. Steve looked at Angela. Then Darren. "Do the kids know what we're talking about?" Angela looked towards Simone and Caleb. "No," Darren whispered. "Then don't do this." Angela immediately turned toward him. "Don't tell me what I can do with the truth after you decided what to do with our marriage." Steve's expression changed. He now understood. He looked at Darren. "You cheating?" Darren stared at the floor. Steve repeated, "I'm asking you." Darren swallowed. It was complicated. Steve's face became serious. "That wasn't a complicated question." Silence. Darren finally said, "Yes." Simone covered her mouth. Caleb turned away. Renee whispered, "Oh God." Angela closed her eyes. Hearing the truth out loud hurt more than she expected. Even though she already knew. Darren moved toward his daughter. "Simone," she stepped back. No, that one word broke something in him. Steve looked toward the production staff. Then toward the audience. The crowd had become completely silent. Steve picked up his microphone. "We need to talk." There was no laughter, no music, no game. Steve looked at Darren. "Come over here." He moved away from the podium. Darren followed. Angela stayed beside her children. Steve spoke quietly. "I'm not your pastor." Darren nodded. "I'm not your counselor." "Yes, sir, and I'm not here to publicly beat you up." Darren looked relieved for half a second. Then Steve continued, "But I'm going to tell you something as a married man." He pointed toward Angela. "That woman shouldn't have had to discover the truth on a screen." Applause began. Steve raised his hand. He didn't want applause. He wanted the family to listen. Darren said, "I know." Steve shook his head. "No, right now you know you got caught." Darren looked at him. "Knowing you hurt somebody is different." That sentence landed. Darren's eyes filled. Angela stared at the floor. Steve asked, "How long?" Darren hesitated. 4 months. Angela looked up sharply. 6. Darren turned. "What?" "I have messages from 6 months ago." Darren said nothing. Angela reached into her purse. Then stopped. She looked at the envelope she had prepared containing printed messages. Steve noticed it. "You got proof?" Angela nodded. Darren closed his eyes, but Angela placed the envelope back inside her purse. "I don't need to read them." Darren looked surprised. Angela's voice began trembling. "I brought them because I thought I might need proof." She shook her head. "But I don't want my children hearing every ugly thing their father said." Simone began crying. Angela walked toward her. "You don't need those details." Simone hugged her mother. Caleb stood motionless. Darren looked devastated. Angela continued, "You need to know your father made a serious mistake." Darren lowered his head. "And your mother didn't cause it." Steve nodded immediately. "That's important." Angela wiped her tears. "I spent 6 months asking myself what I did wrong." Darren looked at her. "Nothing." She continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Was I boring?" "No." "Did I stop paying attention to you?" "No." "Did I get too comfortable?" "Angela, was I not enough?" Darren's face crumpled. "No." Angela stared at him. "Then why?" The question hung in the studio. Darren couldn't answer. Steve stepped back slightly. This wasn't his question to answer. Darren finally spoke. "Because I liked being wanted." Angela shook her head in disbelief. "I wanted you." "I know. No, you don't." Her voice rose for the first time. "I chose you every day." The audience stayed silent. "I made your doctor's appointments. I packed your clothes when you traveled. I sat with your mother during chemo treatments. I remembered every birthday in your family." Darren cried quietly. I knew how you liked your coffee before you even knew how you liked your coffee. A few people laughed softly through the tension. Angela didn't. And you needed somebody else to make you feel wanted? Darren wiped his eyes. No excuse. No, there isn't. Steve stepped closer. What did you tell the other woman about your wife? Darren froze. Angela knew exactly what he had said. Darren whispered, I said, we had grown apart. Angela laughed once. It was not a happy laugh. We ate dinner together the night you sent that message. Darren looked away. Angela continued, you told her we were roommates. Steve slowly turned toward Darren. You said that? Yes. Angela's voice cracked. You kissed me goodnight, and then told another woman our marriage was dead. Darren had no answer. Steve shook his head. See, that's the part people don't understand. He looked at the audience. Cheating ain't just what happens in a hotel room. The studio went silent again. It starts when you begin telling yourself a story that makes betrayal easier. He looked at Darren. You had to turn your wife into the problem so you could feel better about what you were doing. Darren nodded slowly. Yes, Angela began crying again. Not because she wanted Steve to attack her husband, but because someone had finally put words around what had hurt her most. The affair was painful. The lies were worse. Darren had rewritten their marriage so he could justify himself. Steve turned toward Angela. What do you want? Angela looked confused. Right now? No. Steve shook his head. With your marriage. Angela stared at Darren. I don't know. Darren began crying harder. Angela continued. That's the truth. Steve nodded. That's fair. I loved this man for more than half my life. She looked at Darren. Part of me still does. Darren covered his mouth. But I don't know if love is enough anymore. Steve nodded slowly. It ain't. Some audience members looked surprised. Steve continued. Love matters. But marriage needs trust. Respect, truth, he pointed toward Darren. You can't remove 3 legs from a table and keep saying, but the table got love. It's still falling over. A few audience members laughed softly. Darren nodded. Angela said, he told me he was sorry this morning. Steve looked confused. This morning? Darren looked at Angela. She continued. I confronted him at the hotel before we came here. Now everyone understood. This had not begun during the game. Angela had planned to stay quiet. But something had happened that morning. Steve asked, what happened? Angela took a breath. I told him I knew. Darren looked down. He cried. She continued. He apologized. And then? He asked me not to ruin Family Feud for everybody. Steve closed his eyes. The audience groaned. Darren whispered, I know how that sounds. Angela looked at him. That was the moment I realized you still didn't understand. Darren began shaking his head. I was panicking. You were worried about the show. I was worried about the kids. No, Angela's voice became firm. You told me, can we just get through today and deal with this at home? Darren said nothing. Angela pointed toward the stage. You wanted me to stand next to you, smile for cameras, laugh at your jokes and protect your image. Her eyes filled. Again, that word hit Darren hard. Again, Steve stepped closer to him. You understand what she's saying? Darren nodded. Say it. Darren looked toward Angela. I expected her to carry the consequence of my mistake so I wouldn't be embarrassed. Steve nodded. There it is. Darren cried openly now. I am sorry. Angela did not immediately respond. Darren continued. I don't know if there's anything I can say. There isn't. That answer surprised him. Angela walked closer. There aren't magic words. Darren nodded. I know. No, listen. He looked at her. You don't repair this by crying today. I know. You repair it by telling the truth tomorrow. He nodded. And next week. Yes, and 6 months from now when I'm still angry. Darren wiped his eyes. Yes, you repair it when I ask a question you've answered 10 times and you answer it again. Yes, you repair it when my trust doesn't return on your schedule. Darren started sobbing. Yes. Steve looked away for a moment. Angela's words were no longer about punishment. They were about accountability. Then, Caleb spoke. "Dad?" Darren turned. His 17-year-old son had barely said anything since the truth came out. "What?" Caleb's face was tight. "Why didn't you think about us?" Darren looked devastated. "I did." Caleb shook his head. "No, you didn't." Darren moved toward him. Caleb stepped back. "If you thought about us, you wouldn't have done it." Darren's voice broke. "You're right." Caleb looked angry now. "You always tell me being a man means doing the right thing when nobody's watching." Darren closed his eyes. Steve lowered his head. Caleb continued. "So was that just something you said?" Darren took several seconds to respond. "No." "Then what happened?" Darren looked at his son. "I failed my own lesson." Caleb's eyes filled. Darren continued. "And I don't have a better answer than that." Caleb looked away. Darren said, "But what I did doesn't change whether the lesson is true." He wiped his face. "It means I wasn't living it." Steve nodded. "That right there is accountability." Darren looked toward both children. "I can't ask either of you to respect me because I'm your father." His voice shook. "I have to become somebody you can respect again." Simone cried. Caleb finally looked at him. Nobody hugged yet. Nobody needed to. Some wounds require honesty before affection. Steve then looked toward Angela. "What happens when y'all leave here?" Angela took a long breath. "He moves out." Darren looked at her. But he didn't argue. Angela continued. "He already agreed." Darren nodded. "I did. We start counseling separately." Steve nodded. "And after that?" "I don't know." Angela looked at Darren. "Maybe eventually we do marriage counseling." Darren's eyes showed hope. Angela immediately added, "Maybe." He nodded. "Maybe is more than I deserve." Angela looked at him for several seconds. "That might be the first thing you've said today that makes me believe you understand." Steve picked up his cards. He looked toward the game board. Then he looked back at the family. "You know, I was about to ask if y'all wanted to keep playing." The audience waited. Angela laughed weakly. "I don't know if anybody cares about the survey anymore." Steve smiled. "I sure don't." The audience laughed. Then Renee spoke. "I do." Everyone looked at her. "We came all the way from Nashville." Even Angela laughed. Renee continued, "And I've been trying to get on this show for 8 years. The studio erupted. Steve bent over laughing. Renee said, "Y'all marriage can wait. We got money on the board." Even Darren laughed through his tears. For the first time since the truth came out, the family felt human again. Not healed, not fixed, just human. Steve looked toward Angela. "You want to finish?" Angela looked at her children. Simone nodded. Caleb shrugged. Then Angela looked at Darren. He said, "Whatever you want." Angela smiled slightly. That answer would have been useful 20 years ago. The crowd roared. Steve pointed toward Darren. "She ain't gonna let you breathe today." Darren nodded. "I earned that." They returned to the game. But this time everything had changed. The Brooks family did not win fast money. They didn't even reach it. The opposing family stole the final round and won the game. Normally, losing would have disappointed Darren. That day, he barely noticed. When the taping ended, the audience stood and applauded both families. Angela hugged Simone. Caleb hugged his aunt. Darren stayed a few feet away. He seemed unsure whether he was allowed inside the family circle. Then Angela looked toward him. For a second, Darren thought she might invite him closer. She didn't, but she didn't look away either. That was where their marriage stood. Not together. Not completely gone. In between. After the cameras stopped, Steve spoke privately with Darren for several minutes. He didn't give him a speech about winning Angela back. He told him something simpler. Stop asking what you need to say to save your marriage. Darren listened. Start asking what kind of man you'd need to become even if she never comes back. Darren never forgot that. The next morning he moved into a small furnished apartment near his office. The first week was miserable. For 21 years Darren had always returned to Angela, even after arguments, even after work trips, even after his affair began. Home was still Angela. Now there was a silence where she had always been. The apartment had one sofa, one bed, 4 plates. No family photographs. For the first time, Darren experienced something uncomfortable. He had spent months enjoying the excitement of having two lives. Now he had neither. Danielle called him twice. He didn't answer. Then he sent one final message. "I am ending all contact. Do not call me again." He showed the message to Angela. Not because Angela demanded it, because he had begun understanding that secrecy could not be repaired with more secrecy. He also informed his employer about the relationship, because Danielle worked in the same regional office. The company moved Darren to another division. It was embarrassing. He accepted that. There had been a time when embarrassment was the thing he feared most. Now he understood that protecting himself from embarrassment had helped create the disaster. Angela began therapy. At first she spent most sessions talking about Darren, what he had done, what he had said, what she had discovered. Then one day her counselor asked, "What do you want your life to look like if Darren isn't part of the answer?" Angela couldn't respond. For 21 years, most of her future plans had included him. That question terrified her. But it also freed her. Angela started doing things she had postponed. She traveled with Renee for a weekend. She took a pottery class. She rearranged the bedroom. She replaced the old mattress Darren had complained about replacing for 3 years. When Simone asked why, Angela said, "Apparently your mother is having a rebellion." Simone laughed. "Keep going." Caleb struggled more. He stopped answering Darren's calls for several weeks. Darren didn't force him. He texted, "I love you. I understand if you don't want to talk. I'll be here." Every few days, another message. Never guilt. Never pressure. Eventually, Caleb responded, "Can you pick me up Saturday?" Darren cried when he read it. They went for burgers. For almost an hour they talked about school, football, and cars. Then Caleb asked, "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" Darren answered honestly, "I don't know. Do you want to?" "No, does she?" "I don't know." Caleb looked frustrated. Darren continued, "But your mom gets to decide what she needs without me pressuring her." Caleb looked at him. "You really changed." Darren shook his head. "I'm trying to." That distinction mattered. 6 months after the Family Feud taping, Angela and Darren began marriage counseling. Not because Angela had forgiven him completely. She hadn't. Not because trust had returned. It hadn't. She agreed because Darren had respected every boundary she set. He never blamed her. He never complained about how long healing was taking. He stopped asking when he could come home. And most importantly, he stopped treating forgiveness like something he was owed because he apologized. One evening after counseling, they sat inside Angela's car. Darren looked at the house. "I miss this place." Angela nodded. "I know. I miss you." She remained silent. Darren looked at her. "I don't expect you to say it back." Angela finally looked at him. "I do miss you." Hope appeared on his face. She raised a hand. "But missing you isn't the same as trusting you." The hope became quieter. Darren nodded. "I know." Angela smiled slightly. "Good answer." Almost 1 year after their Family Feud appearance, the show invited the Brooks family to send in an update. Steve introduced the video during another episode. "I've been waiting on this one." The studio screen showed Angela first. She was standing inside her school library. "Hi, Steve," she smiled. "We're doing okay." Then, Darren appeared. He was not standing beside her. He was outside his apartment. That detail mattered. They had not rushed the story into a perfect ending just because television preferred one. Darren said, "We're still working." Angela added, "On ourselves first." The video showed Simone back at college, Caleb driving with Darren, Renee joking that she was still angry they didn't win. Then, Angela revealed something unexpected. 3 months earlier, she and Darren had begun going on dates again, not as if the affair had never happened, as two people trying to discover whether a new relationship could grow from the remains of the old one. Their first date was coffee, 45 minutes. Their second was dinner. Darren arrived 15 minutes early. Angela joked. Apparently cheating taught him punctuality. Darren replied, "That's terrible." She laughed. The video returned to Steve. He was smiling. Then, Angela said something that made him serious. "I used to think forgiveness meant pretending something didn't hurt anymore." She shook her head. It doesn't. Forgiveness means I refuse to let what happened control every day that comes after it. The studio applauded. Angela continued, and reconciliation is different. Steve nodded at the screen. That's right. Forgiveness is something I can choose. She looked toward Darren. Trust is something he has to earn. Darren nodded. Every day. The video ended. Steve stood in the studio with his hands resting on his cards. He looked directly toward the audience. That's grown folks' marriage right there. The audience applauded. See, people want everything to have a television ending. He shook his head. Sometimes the husband apologizes and people expect the wife to hug him before the commercial. A few people laughed. That ain't how hurt works. Steve continued. If you break trust in 5 minutes, don't get mad because somebody can't rebuild it in 5 days. The studio became quiet. And if somebody gives you another chance, understand what they're really giving you. He paused. They ain't giving you permission to forget. They're giving you an opportunity to be different. 18 months after the original taping, Darren moved back home. It happened quietly. There were no cameras, no dramatic music. Angela gave him one drawer first. Darren looked at it. One drawer? Angela smiled. Don't get excited. A month later, he got half the closet. Caleb joked that his father had been promoted. Trust returned slowly. Sometimes Angela still felt nervous when Darren's phone lit up. Darren noticed. Instead of becoming defensive, he would place the phone on the table. Not dramatically, just openly. Sometimes Angela checked it. Eventually she checked less. One evening, nearly 2 years after everything came out, Angela and Darren sat on their porch. Their children were both away. The house was quiet. Darren asked, "Do you think about that day, Family Feud?" "Yeah," Angela laughed. "All the time. I still can't believe you called me out in front of Steve Harvey." Angela looked at him. "I didn't plan to." "I know." She smiled. "You kept answering questions badly." Darren laughed. Then he became serious. "I hated that day for a long time." Angela looked at him. "And now?" Darren stared out toward the street. "I think it saved my life." Angela didn't respond. He continued. "Not because it saved our marriage." He looked at her. "Because even if you had left me, I needed to see who I had become." Angela's eyes filled. Darren said, "I thought getting caught was the worst thing that could happen." He shook his head. The worst thing would have been never getting caught and becoming comfortable being that man. Angela reached for his hand. Darren looked down at their fingers. He did not squeeze too tightly. He had learned not to treat every gesture as proof that everything was fixed. After 23 years together, Angela and Darren celebrated another anniversary. They did not recreate their wedding vows. Angela didn't want dramatic promises. Instead, they each wrote one sentence. Darren read his first. "I will never make you carry my dishonesty again." Angela cried. Then she read hers. "I choose today, not our old story." Darren looked at her. That was more meaningful than hearing that she had forgotten. Because she hadn't forgotten. She had simply chosen not to live permanently inside the worst chapter of their marriage. And that became the lasting lesson of what happened on that Family Feud stage. A marriage can survive many things. But survival is not automatic. Love does not erase betrayal. Apologies do not erase consequences. And forgiveness does not mean the injured person owes anyone reconciliation. Sometimes a relationship ends after cheating. Sometimes that's the healthiest outcome. And sometimes two people decide to rebuild. If they do, the person who broke the trust cannot demand the old marriage back. Because the old marriage is gone, they have to build something new. One honest conversation at a time. One respected boundary at a time. One ordinary day at a time. Darren once thought the most dangerous moment of his affair was the moment his wife discovered the messages. He was wrong. The most dangerous moment came months earlier. It was the moment he started telling himself that Angela would never know. Because secrecy had allowed him to forget something simple. Every hidden decision still changes the person making it, even before anybody else discovers the truth. And maybe that was why Steve Harvey's 4 words mattered so much that afternoon. He didn't say, "You need a divorce." He didn't say, "You need to forgive him." He didn't pretend a television host could decide the future of somebody else's marriage. He simply looked at two people standing in the wreckage of a painful truth and said, "We need to talk." Because sometimes, talking doesn't immediately save a marriage. Sometimes, it does something more important first. It ends the lie.